Bridget Jones, 2025. This is the fourth in the trilogy, kind of. I've seen all of the other three Bridget Jones films and enjoyed them. And this one has been billed the best Bridget Jones film yet. And actually, I think I might agree because it kept me entertained throughout. And one thing is, it was released on Valentine's Day, 13th of February. That's the antidote to Valentine's Day, something I rejoice in as a single person. I suppose there's that parallel in Bridget Jones's life that a lot of the time she feels pressure to be in a couple. That's my impression. That hasn't happened so much for me, but I find there's still societal pressure that expects people to pair up, and I haven't for decades upon decades, and I'm quite happy being on my own, more so now. But one thing about the last Bridget Jones, there's been backwards and forwards between the characters played by Hugh Grant and Colin Firth. That was one of the main themes in the first film, and by the third film a decision had been made. And then in this film, it's talked about in the trailer, there is grief. Now, that's covered early on. I won't say much about it. You find out easily by watching the trailer. But because she's been in a bereavement, there's a few things about it that struck me. Things that largely I liked about Bridget. Her stoicism, very British thing. She doesn't cry. She's obviously upset, but there's not tears streaming down her face. It is 4 years after the close bereavement. The strange thing is that some of her friends are sort of expecting her to have moved on. That is awful, the way people think that the pace that you deal with grief is set. It isn't. The stages are nebulous, I think, in real life, because someone says you're coming up to the acceptance stage as if they know, and they might think they know from the way she's behaving, but trying to say that a person is at a particular stage and this needs to happen is so prescriptive and unnecessary, and I don't like that sort of thing. So I had a lot of sympathy for Bridget being in that position. I've known bereavement at various different levels. I talked about it a little in my last video, Better Man. Very close grief is difficult to deal with, but I'm thinking about a colleague who I heard had died in a terrorist attack several years ago. And that was really horrific. That really played on my mind for a long time. There's all sorts of things that happen with grief. There's so much that life throws at you in terms of curveballs, and we have to deal with it. And other people's expectations can be so overwhelming, considering we all individually deal with things in a different way. I warmed to this film, and then I cooled off, and then I warmed to it again. And I suppose it was partly because it's a very long film. I was watching it in a practically empty auditorium, apart from two other people watching it as a couple, and they left before the end. Well, that's fine. Maybe they'd already seen it once. And there's Emma Thompson's character as a doctor. I found that amusing in some ways. I don't think I would like a doctor like her, although in some ways the particular doctor is more personable than many of the doctors I've had, general practitioners, conversations I've had. I don't know if that's unrealistic or it's just that it's the nature of different people's experiences with their doctors. There's a few new characters. There's a member of the Parks Police who's called Rockster. He's quite amusing, the relationship, the way that happens. There is a lot of humour in this film. I love Hampstead. I'm fortunate to live in North London, not that far away from Hampstead. And this time last week, I was walking in a Highgate area close to Hampstead. I'm sure when the weather warms up, I'll be spending time in that area. I love it. There's so much in North London that is worth visiting. Bridget's now a mother. She's got 2 young children. She's taking them to school, and she meets their new science teacher who's played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and he's great, but he's very stern. the teacher, at least at the start. There's a little bit of, I see a bit back and forth. He uses a whistle. He's on duty to get all the children to arrive on time to get into the school for lessons. There's an outward bound course later on. They're out in Cumbria in the Lake District. It evokes wistfulness in me because it reminds me of outward bound trips I've been on, school trips. I grew up in Wales, so orienteering and hiking on the mountains. There's some parts of this film that really appeal because it takes me back to the 70s and 80s when I was in school. That sort of thing. It has changed a little bit, the school outing experience, but not that much because I very much find it evocative of my own experiences when I was on those trips and seeing parents volunteering and going alongside the teachers as responsible adults and helping with taking the kids on this type of trip. I think it's wonderful. I really like that. It's probably changed for the better overall because health and safety is better. Because I remember one time we were on this mountain in Wales and the teachers said, if this rock breaks off, we'll be on the 9 o'clock news. You can see 9 o'clock news because we'll obviously all be dead. Oh, gosh, just that sort of passing observation. Wow. Well, we survived, but there have been occasional awful things that have happened on school trips. So there's that side as well. That flits through my mind. There's a lot of my school experience which I found really awful. And so to be reminded of the good side of it, the nice stuff, that's great. Oh gosh. There's Tinder. There's Bridget Jones climbing a tree with her kids after they get stuck in it. That's with the rockster, who's a kind of toy boy character in the film. It's all cis, straight. The characters are outside my actual experience, but close enough to feel relatable if I put aside my LGBTQIA plus experiences. Bridget does mention asexual at one point. I thought, wow, a little nod to LGBTQIA plus. But apart from that, it is 100% heteronormative, but I parked my looking at it from a queer perspective and kind of enjoyed it probably more than the earlier Bridget Jones. And I was surprised at how long. The first one was nearly 24 years ago, the second one just over 20 years ago, and the third one was 8.5 years ago. So unevenly spaced sequels, but it's wrapped up in a really life-affirming way, very wholesome and positive, and most of the humour was fine. I think I'd have preferred it if it was a little bit shorter. Didn't like balloons being let off into the air, helium balloons. Don't think that's good environmentally. So there's a few small criticisms. There's the whole thing about the length of the film. I think it would be better if it had been a bit shorter, ideally, because I was feeling a bit tired and willing it to end at the end, but I enjoyed it. I'd forgotten this whole Bridget Jones series was loosely based on Pride and Prejudice, and I appreciate that. There were some predictable elements, but I liked most of the jokes and the Bridget's daughter picking up social health leaflets. She's young. There's all this inappropriate stuff blended into the humour. It makes it good fun. Now, what do I give it for a score? Gosh, anything between about 7.5 to 9. I'd say probably 8.25. I think that's the score I'm going to settle on overall. That feels about right. I'd love to know what you think about it. If you like this film review, please like. Thanks for subscribing. Please hit the notification button, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.